I'm Dr. Jane Levesque, and this is the Natural Fertility with Dr. Jane podcast, where we reveal the real root causes behind your fertility struggles. I have my notes. Let's jump right into it. If you've been trying to conceive for more than 2 years, and really if you're between that 3 to 10 year mark, I want you to know that your case is not average, especially if you have already done a lot towards improving your fertility, like changing your diet, taking some supplements, changing your lifestyle, running some labs. Your case is not another case where we just try another supplement protocol or we run another lab and see if that works. You're also not in a space where you can just keep waiting. It is very rare that time makes fertility better. And for most of our couples, when they've been struggling to conceive for 3, 5, or 10 years, they're now approaching their 40s or they're already in their 40s, and time is definitely not on their side. So my hope with this podcast episode is I can shortcut some of the time for you. And if you're not in the complex fertility case yet, meaning, you've only been struggling to conceive for 6 months or 12 months, or you're just thinking about wanting to conceive and you're worried that fertility is going to be an issue for you, I want to shed some light on the mistakes that I'm seeing these couples are making, and not because it's their fault, but because the system is just really poorly designed. So I want you to educate yourself so you can advocate for yourself, so you have a real chance at bringing a healthy baby home and growing the family of your dreams. So you are not an average case if you have been struggling to conceive for more than 2 years. I need you to hear that and understand that, because that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that couples make, is they just keep going and going and going. And next thing you know, it's 5 years. And one of the last couples that I've taken on, it's been 10 years. And it wasn't like this one thing. It was just tiny events throughout their fertility journey that stretched it out. And here they are 10 years later, still no baby. And of course, thousands and thousands of dollars of different treatments, and their health is in a different spot because of those treatments. So we want to avoid that. What I need you to know also, because this is coming from a natural fertility expert, and myself and the rest of my team, we deeply believe that pregnancy is a natural process. So if it's not happening, something is missing. We believe that getting pregnant is what our bodies are built and designed for. We also believe that the body has an incredible capacity to heal, and it is just programmed to do that. The way that I have come to this journey is through my own, IBS and chronic anxiety and weight loss that was really difficult. All these things, I knew deep down that my body had the capacity to heal, and I was frustrated with my body when I was doing certain things to try to manipulate and change the outcome, and it wasn't changing. But I still believed deep down inside that healing was possible. So my hope is that you still have just a little bit, even if it's the tiniest little inkling of light, that you're like, I think this is possible, and I'm frustrated with my body. I know that it's possible. Here's how I know the body is incredible and it can heal. If you want to do this experiment, it will only hurt a little bit, but go ahead and give yourself a little bit of a paper cut and watch what happens with that paper cut. In a couple of days or a week, you will not know that that paper cut existed. Why? Because the body has a mechanism to go ahead and heal the skin and create a scab, and then the scar, obviously paper cut, you're not going to have that scar unless it's very deep. So let's not do that. The point being is, though, the body has a mechanism to heal a cut and to heal any kind of imbalance in the system. It's the body knows, and it shuttles that energy towards it. The same process happens in every single cell of the body. So when we have symptoms, unwanted symptoms, when we have dis-ease, that means that there is an imbalance and the body is trying to adapt. And a lot of it is outside of our conscious, because we have been told not to listen to our system. We have been told that, materialistic things are more important and you should work really hard and it doesn't matter what you eat, and et cetera, et cetera. So what that has led to is this deeper and deeper, deeper disconnect from our system. And when I think about something like pregnancy, a natural process, it requires you to fully and deeply be connected to your body. It doesn't require you, you know what I mean? There's a ton of people that are getting pregnant who are not aware, but if I look at the fertility space and what's happening and the huge decline in fertility, it is very much, in my opinion, connected to the fact that we are more and more and more disconnected from our bodies. We are more and more disconnected from nature, which actually creates a lot of disease in our body, which then, of course, causes the inflammation in the immune system that's dysregulated and then therefore prevents us from being able to conceive. So long story short, we believe that pregnancy is a natural process, and if it's not happening, something is missing. That is my belief, and that is why I built this entire company in my practice. When I'm looking at someone like an OBGYN or a fertility doc who is trained in pharmaceuticals and procedures, there's some that have that belief as well, that pregnancy is a natural process and that something is missing, and it's not that they don't believe that pregnancy is a natural process. It's that we can do things to optimize and support it and have really great outcomes when it comes to, your age or complex fertility cases. We can actually still do something about it. So I think it's really important for you to know what your practitioner's value system is, what they believe and what they're trained and how they think. So then when you're picking your practitioner, you know that is in alignment and you guys are going on the same path. And that is what, as a woman for sure, but as a couple, will allow you to let go and to trust. So then you can actually focus on healing and your nervous system will be a lot more regulated versus when you're not in alignment with your practitioner. When you don't trust the practitioner and you're going through a very invasive procedure like IVF, I literally see the nervous system kind of shut down and the IVF cycle not go as well. So point being is, I share this. I want you to understand that the values are really important here. And when you are in this chronic fertility case, all of my couples that I have helped who have been struggling to conceive for more than 2 years, and definitely when they're getting into the 3, 5, 8, 10-year mark, typically they didn't actually align with the doctor that they were working for. They just felt rushed. And so they pushed themselves going through these procedures, hoping that it was going to work. And a lot of the times they could feel that it wasn't. They just couldn't admit it because they didn't want that to be the case, right? Obviously that makes sense why. So let's talk about the big mistakes that I see with complex fertility cases. The first thing is really this fragmented care and different practitioners collecting different data. And so the fragmentation in your fertility care feels to you like overwhelm and confusion. When you have multiple practitioners who are running multiple different tests, who have different values and beliefs, who have different sets of education, they are building protocols based off 1 or 2 different results, and that's both conventional or functional. There is no integration. A lot of the times there's no retesting to see if the treatment is actually working or properly tracking the treatment. So if I'm talking about conventional, when you're tracking an IUI, I can't tell you how many couples, when I look through it, I was like, well, what about this data? There's so much information missing. How did they know why that IUI didn't work? And typically they don't, which is why they're told just to do another IUI or another IVF cycle because no one actually looked at the data. So I think what's really important when you're going through a complex case is to make sure that you have a base, a practitioner that you trust, and the pieces of information are being integrated together, and we are testing everything and actually looking at it and understanding what the body is telling. What I will use as an example here is a puzzle. Imagine you have a 2,000-piece puzzle, which is very complex. The first thing that you want to do is dump all the pieces onto the table. You're going to flip those puzzle pieces over, and then you're going to start grouping them together to see what fits where. That's how I look at understanding what's going on in your complex fertility case. If you have 10 different people trying to put together 10 different pieces and they're not working together, that fragmentation is going to feel really overwhelming for you. And generally, the protocols are not addressing the root cause. I also see this all the time, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, where we don't actually retest to see if the protocol works. And this is more for my, functional practitioners, chiro, naturopaths, where we run functional tests. The person feels better, and then we don't retest because we assume that the issue has been fixed, and you're like, well, I don't want to spend more money on the tests. You actually, for some cases, it depends on what you find on the first test, and for the complex fertility case, you actually have to be really diligent on retesting and making sure that the treatment is moving the needle. So that doesn't mean that you always have to poop in a box or test blood work or etc. But you need some way to track that the treatment is working, and just feeling better is not enough of a concrete data. I need to see that the sleep is changing. I need to see that the HRV is changing. I need to see that the levels in your blood are changing. So whether that's inflammation or iron levels that were too elevated or liver enzymes or blood sugar, we need to see the change in the data, because it's not concrete enough to say, I feel better, which in reality, of course, we want to feel better, but sometimes that's not enough. So the first hole is that no one's actually owning your whole case. And I think that's really, really important. The second mistake that I see is that the male partner is very, very undertested. They usually get that standard sperm analysis and they say it's good enough. And what it really means, based on the World Health Organization reference ranges, is that it's good enough for IVF. But it doesn't mean it's good for natural conception, and it doesn't mean it's good for optimal pregnancy. And so many men are told, oh yeah, this is fine, it's not an issue, and it's barely in range. So when a woman is presenting to me, and let's say she is 35 or she's 40 and there's autoimmune conditions or it's endometriosis or PCOS, and we know that egg quality is compromised, we need to have great sperm, not good enough sperm. And the parameters by the World Health Organizations are so low, to be honest, I do not consider that good quality sperm. And then, your IVF doctor says, well, we can just wash the sperm. We can just put it in this liquid. We can just do this. Again, we're just scratching the surface instead of really changing the DNA and the quality of what we're giving, especially in the sperm analysis where the male is making new sperm every 72 days. So if you are in the long-term fertility space, more than 2 years, it is good enough is generally not good enough. The experience that I'll share, the couple that I'm talking about who've been struggling to conceive for 10 years, it was only 8 years into their journey that they tested his DNA fragmentation, and it was at 22%, which is high. It's very high. They've had a hard time conceiving, and they've had miscarriages. They've had poor embryo development through the IVF process. So we ideally want a DNA frag of under 15%. This is also someone who only sleeps 4 to 6 hours a night. So he has pretty severe insomnia. And nobody is connecting those dots for them and saying, maybe this is something that's really important. And this is why that DNA fragmentation is high, and there's other inflammation markers and cortisol and blood sugar when someone's not sleeping well. There's such a huge downstream effect. 8 years into the journey for them to get that testing done. That's bad. And a lot of money already spent. So I think we really need to make sure that the partner is deeply, deeply assessed, not just the sperm analysis, but looking at his blood and really understanding his liver function, his liver enzyme, all of the nutrient levels, blood sugar, thyroid, testosterone. We need to understand the health of the male, because the health of the male will directly impact the quality of the sperm in a good or a bad way. And then the third mistake that I really see these couples with complex fertility cases is that you're hunting for one magic root cause. And you're hoping that there's just like this one glaring red flag that's going to tell you exactly why you can't get pregnant. And I rarely see that in practice. For this couple, because we just got the testing, so I'll reference them quite a bit, it's literally 10 different yellow flags for each of them. There's not one single red flag. It's just this thyroid function that's not that good, and the gut function that's not that good, and a little bit of histamine that's elevated, and a hormonal balance is over here, and blood sugar that's slightly dysregulated, and just a little bit of environmental toxic load. And so you add a lot of these little bits, and they add up to something big. So fertility is this interesting space where you cannot just say it's just your thyroid that's impacting your fertility, because it's not just your uterus that's going to grow this baby. And although the thyroid is very, very important for optimal conception, fertilization, and of course, carrying the baby to term is just one piece. So if we just look at the thyroid, of course that's important, but I am asking questions as a natural fertility expert of like, why is that thyroid out of whack in the first place? And I rarely think that thyroid is the root cause. I think something is impacting the thyroid, and so we need to dig a little bit deeper. And the immune system involvement and adrenal function and blood sugar are very closely related to what is going to go on in the thyroid. So do not look for one missing piece, but you want to make sure you're looking at all of the different components that could be impacting your health and therefore impacting your hormones. If you have endometriosis or PCOS, now known as PMOS, autoimmune, inflammation, you've been under chronic stress, you haven't been sleeping well, it's rare that the body is just going to show one thing. And a little side note, the body is really smart, right? Remember I talked about how it heals itself? The body tries to adapt to your environment in order to survive. That's what it's doing all the time. We are seeing an adaptation right now as humanity. It's just not in favor of our health or fertility. If you think about the adaptation that we're seeing now, it's obesity, it's autoimmune conditions, it's allergies, it's fatigue, it's stress, it's all of these things. The body is adapting, and we can see how it's adapting by showing us all of the diseases that it's carrying. It's an adaptation, it's just not a good one. So it's often multiple components in your environment that are causing this poor adaptation. And so in order for us to change, we need to change our environment, and we need to give the body the tools that it needs to support that healing. But the body is already trying to do that. All right, so let's talk about how do we actually approach the fertility cases. The first thing is you want to make sure that you're going to audit the past. When couples are sitting in front of us, we need to understand and review the test and the protocols and what's been done. So whether you're working with multiple functional practitioners and you're like, I don't think this one is going to work, let me go to the next person. You want to make sure that that next person is actually going to take the time to understand everything that's been done so you're not repeating the cases. This is true for IVF. We see more and more couples now going through multiple rounds, like 5, 8, 12, 15 rounds of IVF, which is just unheard of. But she hasn't gone through 15 rounds of IVF through the same doctor. She went to this guy for 3 rounds, and then she went to this person for 3 rounds, and then another person for 3 rounds. The truth is it takes time to get used to and to know the body. So when we're jumping around from to practitioner, sometimes we can actually extend that care. Saying that, if you meet with a practitioner one-on-one and you do not like them, do not bother signing up. It's not going to work. I promise you. The chance of it is really low. So your gut feel with a person, whether that's a functional practitioner or an IVF doctor, really matters, because it's either you feel safe and you trust this practitioner, or your spidey sense is up and you feel like something is wrong. And a lot of women will numb themselves just to go through the process because they feel the pressure from their family, from their husband, from their friends. They feel left behind. It's a highly emotional state. We then just we override our own gut feeling, and then we choose to go with this person that's better than someone else, but it doesn't actually feel aligned. And this is when I see a lot of the same mistakes being repeated. And why auditing the past is important. A good practitioner would look at all your past cases, whether that's, what have you done with IVF? What have you done with different functional testing? So then they can pick up where you left off, where the other practitioner left off, instead of reinventing the wheel. When we're reinventing the wheel, this is the thing that's going to take time. On the functional side, what I will say, it's the first question that I'll always ask when I'm looking at tests is like, hey, there's a lot of stuff that came up on the stool analysis. What was the treatment? What were your symptoms? What was the treatment? And then did you retest? How do you know all of this is gone? And a lot of practitioners are not retesting, and sometimes you as a patient are not following through. And maybe that's because you didn't feel that the protocol was really working, and then the practitioner didn't change it enough, and so you kind of, you had a fallout, if you will. But it's really, if you're going to spend the time and energy and the money on the testing, it is really important that we follow the treatment through and see it actually resolve. So I think that this is important for us as practitioners to test on ourselves and to try out different protocols and make sure the supplements that we're recommending are actually working. There's a lot of practitioners who are recommending supplements they've never taken themselves. They don't know how they actually work in the body, how the body metabolizes. And so I do think that's a big hole in the space. And so you want to find a practitioner that actually walks the walk. The second thing, how do we want to approach is to make sure we treat the full couple, not just the woman. It's you and your partner share your environment. If the woman is really sick, chances are the male also has symptoms. He's just handling them better because his hormonal profile is different. He doesn't have fluctuating hormones. His immune system is therefore going to be a little bit stronger. His metabolism is going to be a little bit better because testosterone, all of the masculine physiology, if you will, is very different from the female. But if I have a female that's really sick, I do not think that the male, he's thriving. It's impossible. It's just that the male is not as bad as the female. And so he just doesn't complain. And sometimes it's also, how the man was brought up is I don't want to complain about things. I want to suck it up. We always test both partners, especially if there's a chronic case of like endometriosis or any autoimmune conditions. It's almost always infection-based and some kind of microbial imbalance. And when we test both male and female, we find all sorts of things for both. And sometimes the male is carrying something that he's passing on to the female and vice versa. I also want to talk about, your nervous system and the share that we have with cortisol and even other hormones and just the safety that you feel in the relationship. Sometimes the infertility is there because we don't actually feel aligned with our partner. And sometimes there are deeper conversations around, do I actually love this person? And am I meant to have a baby with them? Or have I just kind of been blinded by the fact that, everyone else around me is having a baby and I should be there too. And I can't find anyone else. So it's being driven, you staying in a relationship for the wrong reasons. And sometimes the infertility is the reason. And I can't tell because I'm a natural fertility expert. And when I go, and people to any events and people ask what I do, people open up to me about all sorts of things voluntarily. I don't ask for it, but I do appreciate it. And I remember this one guy being like, "Oh, that's so great that you help people." He's like, "We actually got divorced because of our infertility journey." And I was like, "Oh yeah, and like, do you think that was a good divorce?" He's like, "Best thing that ever happened to me." He's like, "I think we were going through infertility because we didn't actually like each other. And we kind of just got stuck in this relationship. And then we kind of got stuck just trying to have kids." And I'm like, very interesting information. Thank you for sharing that. We don't want to underestimate that. And I think a good practitioner will be able to catch that and kind of bring that to the surface and say, "Hey, listen, I'm seeing this is coming up for me. And I'm seeing some rockiness over here in the sturdiness of the relationship. Have you guys addressed this? What's going on?" So we can have an honest conversation. Then once we audit the past in treating the couple, then it's really looking about the right level of intervention. So it's not just about supplement stacks. If you are still in the mindset, I need this protocol to treat this. So we had a new client on board and she actually had a bunch of testing done before she even came to see us. And, that's the case for a lot of our couples, but she just had like a stool analysis and there was a lot of stuff that came up. And the first question, she was like, "Well, can you just give me a protocol for this?" So if you're still in this mentality of like, "Oh, I see this, give me a protocol for this," based on one test, it's unlikely you're going to get to the end goal. This is exactly what I was talking about. If we only have one piece of information revealed, if I just give you one protocol for that, and then we have another piece of information revealed, and then I give you another protocol for that, and then next thing you know, you're on 40 different supplements, you don't know what's doing what, and the body's actually overwhelmed. So we want all of the different pieces of information so we can integrate it all and then prioritize based on the person sitting in front of me in everything that's going on in the system, knowing the hierarchy of treatment, what can be treated first, what's going to be treated second and third, how do we get to the end goal, when do we need to change things, etc. The drainage, the mitochondria, the methylation, the workload, the emotional load, mental emotional state in general, we need to assess all of that before we give protocols. That's what I think allows us to be really, really effective as practitioners when we understand the person as a whole sitting in front of us. And in complex fertility cases, a lot of the times you're just given one piece, okay, try this and then try that and then try this. And, it just doesn't work, unfortunately. And then the last thing that I will say for how we approach, and these are the hard conversations that we as practitioners have with our patients, but we want to be honest about the real change that's going to be required. And this ties into the last point, where if I'm just giving you a protocol based on a certain bug or the leaky gut or some inflammation or the vaginal microbiome imbalance, if you're just basing it on that, but there's no real change or transformation happens, we see you get addicted is not the right word, but dependent on supplements and protocols forever because no actual change has taken place. And I'll give you this as an example. If I could put my couples in a bubble in literally for, maybe a month, definitely minimum a week, but maybe a month or 3 months ideally, and just tell them exactly just control everything that they do in a day, from the food that they're eating to when they're going to bed and how they're sleeping to their environment, and making sure that there's no mold and they're getting the highest quality source of food and nature time, all of these things. If I could control that, most would get pregnant within 6 months, even some of the most chronic cases. Problem is, though, that's really hard to do because your environment that has created, quote unquote, the disease right now that's been your life for a really long time. So we're asking you to make some really big changes that you might not be able to do yet. And whether that's leaving your job or changing your schedule in your job or moving your homes or just like radically changing how you eat and how you exercise, like it's a lot to ask of you. And I understand that because I've had to make those changes, and whether it's friendships that I had to let go of or moving out of homes or finding a new schedule, or some of my patients, if they're working night shifts, it's like, you've been doing that for forever. You're not just going to be able to find another job like tomorrow, but that's the biggest thing that would actually make the biggest improvement in your fertility journey. So I say this with like utmost compassion because I think it's extremely difficult to just flip your life upside down, but sometimes that is what's required. And so what we're managing with our couples is how do we mitigate some of the environment that they're living in now with a plan in the future to help them create a different environment that will actually allow them to thrive as humans and then to thrive as parents and then obviously for their children to thrive. And one example that I want to use is one of my patients who has, over 100 pounds to lose, is this classic PMOS case who was told she has unexplained infertility. There's a lot of autoimmune stuff. We're even trying to rule out endometriosis because there's just so much going on. And she's had it going on for a long time. Point being, though, we started working in about 6 months of working together. She's lost 20 pounds, which is fantastic. It's amazing. But we have another 100 pounds to lose. And if we go at that rate, we're talking about a couple of years. You don't have a couple of years when you're 38 years old. You have already been extremely inflamed and have all of these disease processes that have been going on for God knows how long. And you're only finding out about them now. We have the very hard conversation where we admire the progress. You've done so much and it's incredible. I'm not sure it's enough. Here's what I would do if I were you, if you want to have a real chance of having a baby naturally. And what do you think is possible? So then I can work with her. I can coach her through the ups and downs of being frustrated that she has to do more than an average person. She's frustrated that she let herself go to this point where things are not good, and now she has to be really, really drastic about those changes. And she's also in a place where it took her 3 or 4 years before she met me and before she really started taking this seriously. There's a lot that's pent up in that conversation. And so for complex fertility cases, we need to have practitioners who are willing to sit with us through all of that rawness and all of those emotions, because it is a lot, but someone who is also going to just say, hey, let's try it. Let's see what happens. Versus if you go to an IVF clinic, they just go, you missed your chance. Or, I don't think it's a good idea, or I don't want to do it, or just do this IVF, and if it doesn't work, well, then, you've run out of options. Sorry. And as naturopaths and natural fertility experts, we're like, well, what's the worst that can happen? You're going to get really healthy. So we had that conversation, and then I usually just write out my most intense protocol, aka like if I put you in a bubble, this is what I would do. as close as I can to that, and then see how much of it is realistic for her to do. And it's been incredible. She lost like 10 pounds in the first week of doing that, and then another 10 pounds the week after that. The weight just started to melt off. And then I know we're not expecting that forever, but we did need to see that reaction because there's a lot of inflammation. There's a lot of water that you're holding on to when you have a lot of extra weight. And it was the continuous glucose monitor that actually helped her make the biggest shift, because she could just have that direct feedback of, oh, when I eat this, my blood sugar does that. And if I don't walk after I eat, then, oh my God, my blood sugar goes out of control. And then if I don't sleep well, my blood sugar is really hard to manage. So it had this really positive effect on her. She started to sleep better. She was walking way more. She was really mindful of what she's eating. And then we're doing some fasting every month, with her cycle, to make sure that her system feels the best when we're pushing it a little bit more. And then in the second half of the cycle, we increase her calories. So within a month, it was like, okay, now you lost 20 pounds. Whereas before it took us 20 pounds to lose, 6 months to lose 20 pounds. And now it took us a month. Like I said, we're not going to be able to keep that up, but we need to see that drastic change. So being honest about the real change that's required, I think that's something really hard for me as a practitioner still, because I know what I'm asking of people, and it's a lot. And whether it's doing a mold assessment in your house and figuring out that you have mold, and now potentially having to either move houses or having to remediate and spending 40, 50 grand on remediation, that's a big ask. That's a big ask. Or asking someone to leave their job because the job is actually making it so hard for them to thrive. And that's also a lot. I have, a nurse that I'm thinking about and working night shifts. And when we first met, we put the Oura ring on her, and it's like, girl, your data is nuts. Like, you're not eating. And then when you're tired, you're eating Sour Patch Kids, and you're like, these 2 days a week that you work at nighttime, or 3 days a week, are throwing off all of your data. So the data can be really powerful, but then it's not about, okay, she has to quit her job. But then she started being very mindful about what she does on those night shifts. So we're mitigating what we can do. And then long term, she's looking for a job. She's looking for another position where she's not required to do that, because it is something that's preventing her. So I just say that with utmost compassion, because I think it's a lot. But in these complex fertility cases, we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to do to be able to bring this baby into this world? And what is this baby asking of me? What is this baby asking of us as a couple? And that brings me kind of to this last point of your mindset, where we need to stop comparing. We need to get out of the victim mentality. We need to just honestly start becoming the person that we really need to become in order to bring this baby into this world. And every person is different. Your fertility journey is unique to you and your partner. So I think we all have areas in our life that are really, really hard. And when we're looking at social media, or even when we're hanging out with our friends, a lot of the times you're just seeing the highlight reel. And that's probably one of the hardest things for my fertility. It's like that bitterness that you start to accumulate, because you see someone who is overweight and had no issues conceiving, or you see someone eating really poorly or drinking and smoking, and you're like, how is this possible? Like, I'm doing all of these things and I'm not getting pregnant. And, as someone who has had a lot of hardship in my life and gone through many cycles of like, why do I have to work so hard? I've realized that everybody has an area in their life that just is really difficult for them for whatever reason. And when you can put blinders on and just say, this is my journey, and just because someone was able to get pregnant, I don't know anything about the quality of that pregnancy. I don't know anything about the health of that baby or that postpartum, or I wouldn't actually genuinely trade places with this person. I think that's really important for you to not just compare the highlight reel, but look at the person as a whole and everything, all of the different aspects in their life, and be like, would I trade? And if you wouldn't, then we need to just, like I said, put blinders on and focus on the thing that we can control in our life. But getting out of the victim mentality is something that's really, really helpful in just focusing on the task at hand. And the questions that I get my patients to ask, that we all do as a clinic, is like, hey, who do I need to become in order to bring this baby into this world? Who do we need to become as a couple? and really talk about any doubts that you have, whether that's, with your partner or with the home that you're in or with your family or like whatever it is. Most women are so intuitive, and deep down when I say, what do you think it is? After we get through the overwhelm, I'm just so overwhelmed and I'm getting like, yeah, but what do you think it is? I think I have all this inflammation and I think my digestion is a mess and I think my thyroid, and it's like, right, you are correct. It is all of those things. So now let's work on optimizing those instead of just talking, instead of just the feeling, let's add the data to it. So then we can actually help you take control and help you understand how to heal yourself and be intentional about it. And what I will use as an example, remember that paper cut? That paper cut can heal very quickly if you put some vitamin E on it and keep the skin moisturized. You take really good protein, your immune system is healthy. That cut will heal very fast. But if you have really poor circulation, and let's say you put a tight band and then you put that hand into a fridge, the body will still heal, but it will take it a lot longer because it's now working against all of these other aspects. That's the same in the body. So the thyroid or the endometriosis or the PCOS, we can heal those things. But a lot of the times we don't realize when we're working against our body and then we're getting frustrated that it's not working. And I can talk about that for a long time because the times that I had the IBS and anxiety and the stubborn weight, the things that I thought I needed to be doing were actually the opposite of what I needed to be doing to let my body heal. And that's the over-exercising and controlling the food and all of the things, the different diets that you hear out there. For me, it was all about nervous system regulation, which, I didn't even think about, and it wasn't. Back then, we didn't talk about it in the same way. So anyways, let me just recap. If you've been struggling to conceive for more than 2 years, you are not an average case. I need you to really feel that and understand that. The second thing is when you have fragmented care, when you're not testing the male partner enough, and when you are thinking about this one root cause, that's going to keep you stuck. And then the third thing, you likely need a full case integrator and just this bigger life shift than you have been willing to make. And I know that that's hard to I don't want to say, I want you to know that I understand how hard that is to make, but that's often the biggest change. The thing that you're resisting the most, or you're like, I know, but I don't know how, or it's difficult for me, I don't want to let go of this. Or with some of my patients, especially my male patients, where they only just want to work on the things they want to work on, that often will keep you stuck. It's the thing you don't want to work on. It's the big thing that's going to be the most difficult. It's actually the one that's going to make the biggest change in your health and the biggest change in your fertility journey. So I hope you guys find this helpful. If you've been trying for more than 3 years and this is resonating, you can go ahead and click the link down below, apply to work with us. If we can help, we'll show you what that looks like. If we can't, we'll make sure to point you in the right direction. But my goal is to really help women and couples to shortcut their journey to having a baby in their arms. And I do not think that you need to be struggling for 3, 4, 5, 10 years in order to get real answers. And we're already starting to see shift in the fertility space where women are saying no to multiple IVF rounds. They want to know the answers. And I just want you to know, if you're that woman, you are all changing the industry. And I think that's beautiful. We're seeing that women no longer are saying yes to birth control because we understand the implications of that. This is the same thing. We do not need to struggle for 1, 2, 3, 5 years to get to the bottom. You don't even have to start trying to conceive in order to assess your health. So my hope is that with this podcast, it gave you some aha moments and opened a different way of thinking so you can, approach your fertility journey slightly different. Like I said, if this is resonating and you want to apply to work with us, please do. And if not, find a practitioner that will help you. Listen to your intuition, listen to your gut, and don't waste time. Time is so precious in the fertility space. So thank you for being here, and I will see you soon.